Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening. So, this video is about women who are often not talked about. At one time, these women were talked about because they were very influential, and it may not have been in the best light. To name just a few, the title of this article is How Hollywood Madam Heidi Fleiss Lost Interest in the Sex Business. Well, at one time, she was very much a part of the sex business, but not what you would normally consider. A lot of times, people will view women as being weak. A woman is a sign of weakness, or she's dependent on a male, or she is someone that needs to be taken care of. But that is not the case for all women. All women don't always have to be taken care of. They can do well or maybe even better by themselves. Sometimes it may not always be good, but if you look at the past and the histories of some of the women that have come before, it'll show you that women aren't weak. And it may not always be positive, but it'll show you that a lot of times women and the power that they possess is very much underestimated. And so the reason why I'm doing this article is because I know a lot of people may not remember. Some may be too young to even know who this woman is, but the title sort of speaks a little bit into the life of this one particular female. This whole video is not just about her, but she would be more closer to our time. How Hollywood Madam Heidi Fleiss lost interest in the sex business. So this was in the People magazine under crime, and I'll tell you why, because this is a picture of how she used to look. In the 1990s, Heidi Fleiss was one of the most notorious women in America. Known as the Hollywood Madam, she managed to run an upscale prostitution ring that catered to rich and famous people. She made more than $1 million in her first 4 months of business and once wrote in Yale Law School's legal affairs publication that she could make up to $97,000 a night in commissions from her prostitutes. So this woman, pictured here, was Hollywood's notorious madam, one of the wealthiest women in the underworld. But her high-flying life didn't last. So in 1993, she was arrested on multiple charges, including pandering. Her 1994 conviction for pandering was late. When details about her black book of clients emerged, the media speculated about those names that were written within the pages. And as we all know, and we know him today, as it turned out, the biggest name that became public was Charlie Sheen, who testified that he had hired Fleiss's call girls at least 27 times and paid at least $50,000. Fleiss has said that many other notable celebrities used her services, but she has always declined to name who those people are. So we can only speculate or wonder. The next year, federal tax evasion charges were filed against her. Convicted in 1996, she was sentenced to 7 years in prison, but she only spent 20 months behind bars before being released to a halfway house. Fleiss became a minor celebrity after her release, so she began dating an actor by the name of Tom Sizemore, whom she later accused of domestic violence, and he was convicted and sentenced to 17 months in jail. She appeared on Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew in 2009 Sizemore was another participant. Fleiss has spent additional time in rehab and was arrested on drug charges in 2008 and sentenced to 1 year probation on a drug conviction. In 2013, she was allegedly found with more than 400 marijuana plants and was charged with possession of marijuana with the intent to sell. This was before marijuana was legalized in the state of California. So the district court dismissed the 2013 charges after noting that deputies found no evidence of packaging, scales, money, or paraphernalia used for smoking marijuana. Fleiss attempted to open an all-male brothel catering specifically to women, but the idea never became a reality. So this is Heidi Fleiss now, and I believe she's at LAX airport in this picture here. She is now, I believe, 51 years old. It's probably older now. This article is fairly, let me see the date on the article. In that picture, she's younger here, but the other picture, she was older. So she could be a little bit older than 51, but this is her here. Heidi Fleiss pictured in this picture, she was 51. And living on a 10-acre ranch outside of, okay, so bear with me, I'm pronouncing this, Pahrump, Nevada. She has kept a relatively low profile, appearing in a handful of documentaries and TV specials, but life hasn't been easy for her. Earlier this year, she gave an extensive interview to author David Friend for his book, Naughty 90s. In the book, she admitted that she had recently kicked a crystal methamphetamine habit, calling it the white trash drug. She said that the public humiliation of celebrity rehab was very therapeutic. So Fleiss says she has left the sex work behind and instead chooses to care for more than 20 exotic birds that she inherited from an elderly neighbor. I fell in love with these birds and I lost interest in the sex business, she told Friend. I'll never turn my back on them. Despite her rocky road, Fleiss remains a proponent of legalizing prostitution. Sex for money will happen no matter what, she wrote in Legal Affairs. You can't stop sex. And she is so true with her words. So that's basically, in a nutshell, the Heidi Fleiss article on people and crime. So this might be a much, by a couple of years older, but I thought this was an interesting topic because it moves into women and how they're viewed in society. And a lot of times people see women as being the prostitute or the one on the other end that is being solicited, is being, trafficked. And a lot of times they don't look at the women, or they don't talk about the women like Heidi Fleiss. And I'm going to go in time right here. The 12 most notorious prostitutes and madams of the Wild West. And so I'm not going to read everything about all of them, but I'll name a few. And I'll read like a few. Eleanor Dumont, who chased down a man who swindled her and threatened him with a shotgun. Like any true entrepreneur, Eleanor Dumont saw opportunity wherever she went. She opened several successful gambling parlors in California, offering a rarity during the time, a respectable lady dealer. Her parlor, Vignette, was finely furnished, served champagne instead of whiskey, and only accepted patronage of well-dressed gentlemen. It was hugely popular, but men lost interest in Dumont's beauty, waned, and more women began to fill the camps. So after the gold ran dry and the crowds cleared out, Dumont she bought a ranch. And so she, I guess, earned the money over time. So during this time, she fell in love with a handsome silver-tongued man named Jack McKnight. So Dumont fell head over heels in this man. Unfortunately, McKnight was a con man, and he ended up stealing all of her fortune or all of her hard-earned money and selling her ranch and leaving Dumont completely destitute. Not one to take that type of treatment from anyone, she chased down her former lover with a shotgun and killed him. In need of money, she began to set up gambling tables at the mining camps, and it was said that she met Calamity Jane at one of these camps and tried to teach the famous frontierswoman woman how to play poker. That's just one. Fanny Porter entered. The next woman is Fanny Porter, who entertained Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid at her brothel. And it goes on to talk about the life of this group. So Fanny Porter ran one of the more high-end brothels in Texas, and one that was said to have fine glass fixtures, silk sheets, and plush carpeting. Special guests, like the members of the Butch Cassidy's gang and bandits known as the Wild Bunch, were given chilled champagne. Despite being a classy lady, she was no pushover and was known to chase law enforcers off her property with a broom. Porter's boarding house served as a rest stop, hideout, rendezvous, and headquarters for Butch Cassidy and the rest of the Hole in the Wall gang. So it's said that Sundance Kid met his later girlfriend, partner in crime, Etta Place, while she was working at Fanny's brothel. The last time the Wild Bunch showed up at Fanny's place, intent on going their separate ways, she treated them like real VIPs, throwing them an elaborate going-away party. The next is a woman called Big Nose Kate, who broke Doc Holliday out of jail. And she's pictured here. Mary Catherine Harney, or better known as Big Nose Kate, is probably the best known for her on and off again relationship with the famous gunslinger Doc Holliday. Harney ran away from her foster home when she was about 16, became a prostitute, and shortly after, she met Holliday when she moved to Texas, and the two started a lengthy, rocky relationship on and off again. It was said that Harney, which she is better known as Big Nose Kate, and Holliday would have heated arguments and would be violent or become violent whenever Harney drank too much. So despite the unhealthy relationship, Harney once broke Holliday out of jail by starting a fire and pulling a gun on a security guard, a jail guard. So Holliday was so grateful that he promised to give up his gambling, and Big Nose Kate also promised to give up her life of prostitution. However, both of that promise from the both of them was very short-lived, and that on and off again rocky relationship continued until Holliday's death. And so it goes on to mention Molly Johnson, who was a tabloid superstar. So Molly Johnson once owned the brothel on one of the corner streets of Deadwood, and her life appealed to the townspeople in the same way the lives of reality show stars that you see today appeal to us. So her antics often made headlines in the Deadwood newspaper. So one of her favorite pastimes was renting a carriage and riding it up and down the camp, snubbing any lesser women she passed. So she also turned heads when she married a Black entertainer, Lou Spencer. Johnson served as a mentor to 3 gold-haired female employees, Ida Clark, Ida Shepelin, and Jeannie Deschanel, and was known as the Queen of the Blondes. One notable event that was reported by the papers was the buggy race between Johnson and some of her girls. So after getting drunk at a baseball game, she rented 2 buggies and raced them. and none of the women were hurt, but it was said that the buggies were reduced to splinters. Okay, so I'm going to skip over, but this woman right here, Pearl DeVere, charged her clients $250 a night. And back in that time, it was a lot of money. So today it would have been like $6,500 today for a night. And so there was a person by the name of Ah Toy who used the courts to her benefit. And Ah Toy was the first Chinese prostitute in San Francisco. And she was an Asian woman in the Old West. So there's more about her here. And so I'm going to skip over her, but I'm going to go on to talk about this woman here, which some people may have heard the name Mary Ellen Pleasant. She was an abolitionist hero. But what some may not know is Mary Ellen Pleasant, who was also known as a Mistress Pleasant. She was called the mother of civil rights in California and was busy. She was a busy woman, perhaps a former slave, though her early past is not entirely known. She was heavily involved in the abolitionist movement, along with her husband, James Smith Pleasant, helped freed slaves via the Underground Railroad. When suspicions arose about her involvement with John Brown and the Harper's Ferry, she escaped the East Coast and moved to San Francisco, where she was able to pass as a white woman, despite her being African American or perhaps of a mixed heritage or race, and secure herself a position as an advisor to Thomas Bell, a Bank of California director. It is said that at one point she was one of the richest Black women in America. She made her money in a number of ways. Some reports say she owned and ran a number of lucrative bordellos where she would set up her girls with rich white men. Others say she would groom and train the girls to marry these men. On the abolitionist front, she gave $30,000 to help fund John Bell's slave rebellions and won a court case against a company when she was refused a seat on one of the streetcars. And so there's another woman by the name of Julia Bulette, who was an original hooker with a heart of gold. And so it is said that Julia Bulette arrived in Virginia City, Nevada in 1859, and she was the only single woman in town. She was described as being a beautiful and witty woman who was sought by many of the miners in town. Soon after arriving to Virginia City, Bulette decided to become a self-employed prostitute. Bulette was said to have a heart of gold, donating large sums of money to the town, nursing the sick miners, raising money for the Union during the Civil War. She was made an honorary firefighter because her numerous charitable contributions to the town people. In 1867, Bulette was brutally murdered in her bed by a French drifter. She was found in her bedroom, strangled and bludgeoned to death. Thousands attended her funeral, and many businessmen or business people in the town closed shop out of respect for her. There's a Dora Dufresne who became a madam at just the age of 15. Dufresne started off as a dance hall girl, and at the age of 15 quickly promoted herself to a madam. Dufresne had several prostitution houses in Deadwood and was the most popular of which was called Diddlin' Dora's. The brothel promised its patron the 3 Ds, dining, drinking, and dancing, and called itself a place where you can bring your mother. During her time in Deadwood, she befriended Clement Calamity Jane, and the two women remained friends well in their 40s. They reconnected later in life, and Jane, suffering from the effects of alcoholism, came to Dufresne looking for work. She gave Jane a job at her brothel as a cook and a laundrywoman. Jane, shortly thereafter, she died. Okay, so there's also a person they call Squirrel Tooth Alice, who kept prairie dogs as pets. There's Mother Damnable's body, who turned to stone. And that one's kind of short. So I guess I will read it. So Mary Ann Conklin, Mother Damnable, as she was more commonly known on the account of her temper and constant swearing, managed a hotel and brothel in Seattle. She could curse like a sailor in English, French, Spanish, German, Portuguese, and Chinese. It is said that she was always surrounded by wild dogs and that she carried stones in her apron and she would throw them at people who incurred her wrath. Conklin died in 1873 and was buried in Seattle Cemetery. Years later, the bodies in the cemetery were moved to make room for a park, according to the legend. When Conklin's body was dug up, it was incredibly heavy. Curious, the workers opened the coffin and found that her body had completely turned to stone. There's a Josephine Hensley who became the largest landowner in Montana's red light district. This is another woman, known as Chicago Joe by her customers. Josephine Hensley left Chicago and set up shop in a mining town in Montana. She opened her first brothel in a log cabin in Helena, Montana, employing a full orchestra and entertaining the guests when she and her girls were busy entertaining other guests. Her brothel was so popular that she eventually had to move her business to a larger building. She started to invest in real estate and with her husband opened the dance hall in the Red Light Saloon. She became the largest landowner in the district and was so prosperously prosperous at what she did that she was dubbed the Queen of the Red Light District. And so I kind of read quite a bit of the past. And so this brings me to this. There's a series that comes on Netflix. It's old, but it's not that old. It was a TV series or docuseries. It's in the genre of, it could be docuseries crime, docuseries TV series, women behind bars. And so what I've noticed is I pay close attention to a lot of the different scenarios of the women behind bars. These are the things that I've come up with that I've noticed. I'd say between 80 to 85% of the reasons why women are behind bars is because of a man. And I know that seems pretty rough, but it is true. There's a couple of reasons, and I'm just throwing a couple of them out there. It's because the woman was really jealous, and so she killed for a man, or she killed a man in self-defense, or she killed for a man because she was trying to be closer to the man, or she was accused of something and the man put her up to doing it. And then there's cases where men have abused women and they don't get prison time. And the woman ends up getting prison time because as a result of being abused by the male, she grows up in a life where she spirals downward. And it's all the blame and everything is placed on the female. And so I've noticed that in most of those shows. And I guess a lot of times when you look at women that are locked up, it's baby daddy drama, or somebody was jealous of somebody or they got in a fight with another female over a guy. Usually it's things like that. And If she's a if it isn't because of a male, if she's like, has like a real strong addiction to drugs, or she's got other issues going on, but you best believe that there's some man behind it. He's either trying to get her off drugs and he found her, she was already on it. That's usually not the case. Usually it's he's on drugs and she's on drugs, and he's the reason why she's on drugs because he's doing drugs, so she's doing drugs right along with him. And a lot of times I really, really paid attention to a lot of the things, but a lot of the reasons I've noticed why women are locked up is because of a male. And so I really feel like a lot of times people underestimate the powers that women do have and the influence that women can have in a lot of different ways. They view women as being weak and as being inferior of the genders. But that I really feel is not the case, especially when you look at the whole story behind who these women really were and what their true intents were. Despite how people usually view women, there's a lot that women have to offer. Sometimes the energy is not positive. It could be directed into things that are positive. And a lot of times when we see like female entertainers who are such as female entertainers like Beyonce, she exudes a strong, powerful female and a strong influence, beauty. And she also has now, more recently, as she's gotten older, even though she doesn't look like she's gotten older, but in her some of the things that she does on stage when it comes to social issues, she has shown up and she's done some performances that are in reference to Black, political issues when it comes to some of her videos, some of her shows. Some of it has just been for the mere pleasure of entertainment. And recently she was at Coachella, and it was said that she was really, 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 she really showed excellence in her performance as she executed on stage. But a lot of times, the reason why I'm bringing all of these up, and I know it started off as something where it seemed like it was more like a negative, but if you really look at all of this and you really wrap all of it up and you really think about it, women have a lot of power and they can use it for something negative or they could use it for something more positive. And a lot of times, I think when women are in the limelight or when they have, a lot of money or they possess a lot of wealth or a lot of knowledge, such as Oprah at 2.8 billion, her net worth is, at least that's what it says in Forbes. When it is a Black female, a lot of times she's viewed already in a negative because of the stereotypes, because of race. But if you look at the accomplishments and the mindsets of women, women writers, women directors, women producers, women entrepreneurs, women just period, women who have created a past, a present, and a future. Women who are young that people usually look up to and they see them as, you know, maybe insignificant, but there is significance because they change things in society, change the way you view women, especially women if they're expecting. This is Cardi B. And so she has performed during the times that she's been pregnant, which is pretty awesome because a lot of times you don't see a lot of black females or females that are of color, rather, I would say for her in that respect. You don't see a lot of females, and I would put her in the category of females of color because she is mixed heritage. But she's performed as an expected mother. And I think that's pretty awesome because you don't see a lot of that. And it's not represented a lot of times, but she has done that. And she's done an awesome job of doing that. And if you look at her past and look at where she's come from and what kinds of things she was involved in to bring herself to this point, it pretty much brings me back to the underestimation that people have of females. Oh, she's weak. She's a woman. Women are weak. They're not really strong. That is not the case. And so I really feel like people underestimate the power that women really do possess. Feminism is not about trying to dominate males. Feminism is a whole lot more, is women who exude their womanhood and their womanist side of them. And a lot of that is just as strong, if not even more stronger than what a male's presence is. And so women, a lot of times, are the ones that will sort of take up the slack. They will do things that you would not believe, that you would assume that only a male presence calls for. But a lot of times, to have that balance, to have a woman around who can think, who has a mind, who can speak for herself, who exudes a presence where it's not just about beauty, but it's also about intellect. It's about people who can make things move in ways that you wouldn't believe. Says a lot about who women really can be. Some may look at it as a negative, and then others may look at it as interesting and a positive. Some may look at it as sometimes where women can also create their own demise. And that is also true. And sometimes you can do things that are good, that can help a lot of people, and you can also do a lot of harm to a lot of people. And so I feel like people should never really underestimate the powers that women do possess, because women are very powerful, especially here in America. And we do have a history, we have a present, and we have a past, we have a present, and we have that history, and we have a future. And so as much as people say negative things about women, about females, and they put us in a place where we're viewed as being the weaker sex, that is not the case. I just feel like women are a lot of times misunderstood, and a lot of times it's easy to blame women for the troubles of males and to let males kind of get off easy because they can always use that alibi that, oh, it was the way she dressed, or it's the way she talked, or it was her fault, she asked for it. And if you look at some of these older episodes of why some of these women, I'm not saying that they shouldn't be behind bars, but what I'm saying is if you really look and listen to the reason why some of these women are locked away, a lot of it has to do with because some man put them there. And if it wasn't for the women, maybe the men wouldn't be where they're at. So sometimes a woman could end up getting a man locked up. Sometimes the man, he's not locked up, but the woman is now locked up because of the man. And so a lot of people don't really pay attention to these things, but women do have power. What that power is, only that woman knows, and only that person who is close to her or close enough to her will ever get the chance to know. Some of us only see a smidgen of what women possess. We may see them look pretty on stage and dance and perform, but you really don't know what are in the minds of women until they act it out in society. So, who is the richest woman in the world? How much money does Oprah make in a second? What is the net worth of? Okay, so they go on talking about all the different people and celebrities. So, I feel like people really underestimate the powers that women have. And so that's basically what this whole video was about. Um, Also, I know it's not about the usual things that I talk about, but I feel like some of it was tied in there a little bit, but not entirely. I did mention about African American women or women of color, but women in general, I feel are very much underestimated, very much taken very lightly, and they're not regarded as having any strength. And that I feel breeds the breeding ground of the hate that is put out on social media. I feel like a lot of times there's a lot of videos that are put out in order to make women feel inferior, to make them feel less than males. A lot of times there are uh, sort of views in society, in American society, that place women at the bottom and as needy people, and as if we're not able to think for ourselves and able to carry on with our lives in the event if we lose a spouse. And so I'll just make mention of this here. I had a coworker that said they knew somebody who's a female who had a husband. And the way he talked about this woman, he made it sound like she was this picture of strength and that the woman was really strong, but she was only strong because she had this man with her. But when the man died, oh, she was sad and, almost like she was useless, like there was no worth to her. Well, oh, she remarried and she's fine again. And so that's usually the way some people feel. They feel like to validate themselves, they have to be with someone and it has to be a male counterpart. Not necessarily true. A lot of times, males are not complete unless there is a female around. It's usually the other way around. And so I'm saying that, and I'm saying that with confidence because I know this, and I know this to be true because if it weren't, you wouldn't have all this hate. If men were confident about being alone, you would not have a lot of men saying all these hateful things about women. I feel like the reason why they do this is because they really do want to have some woman around, even if it's not in a relationship, even if it's like a family member or a sister or someone. There has to be some kind of female presence to at least guide them through some of the things that they feel uncomfortable or they don't feel knowledgeable about when it comes to the feminine ideals. And so I feel like women have a lot of power, they have a lot of strength, they have a lot of use, and they're just as important as men are, if not maybe even more important. And so I just think that people don't really take women serious enough. Not all women should be looked down on and looked at as if they are useless. I don't feel like that is true. I feel like that there's been a lot of hurt, there's been a lot of pain, there's been a lot of stories that have not been told, and women's voices are also not heard. So a lot of times in social media, they talk a lot about, the problems with African Americans. They talk about the problems with poor people and with people of color, and then they talk about the people who um, don't have a voice. Well, women are people too that don't have a voice. And a lot of times it's always looked at as women are weak and women are, you know, you can push this one aside and get the next. And, or a lot of times you'll see stories where there are stories about infidelity. And most often, if something has happened to a woman where she has children and she finds out her husband is cheating, or if she, and I'm not saying that women don't cheat. What I'm saying is a lot of times, even if it isn't her fault, it's always somehow blamed on the woman. Well, maybe you didn't dress the right way, you didn't look the right way, maybe you nagged too much. It's it's like easy to blame women for a lot of things. And I think that's the sign of women are weak, so they're easy to blame. And so that's the reason why, if you look at some of these incidences on women behind bars, what I've noticed the most often, there's been stories where women were molested by a father, or a mother's boyfriend, or maybe their own real father, and you don't hear that much talk about it. It's always either not talked about, or it the blame is placed on the female, that it must have been her fault, or she was at the wrong place at the wrong time. It's never any accountability to the male. And so I believe that's kind of a breeding ground for the sexism in all of that. And so that is what I've noticed a lot of. And so I know this video may not be widely agreed upon, but I also find it too that women will settle for males who are very sexist, are very much into machoism, and will treat them really bad because they have a fear of being alone. Because some women feel like if they don't have a boyfriend or a husband, that people will look at them as something is wrong with them. And being alone is not a sign of weakness. Being alone sometimes may mean you're waiting on the right person to be involved with. It may be a sign more of strength rather than weakness. Weakness is more a person who will settle for anything less because she's afraid to wait for the right one to come along. That's the way I view it. And so I guess with that being said, I know I started off with Heidi Fleiss, and I went into this whole spiel about women and the different types of women, of course. And so I just felt there was a need for this to come out. I know people may say, oh, Heidi Fleiss, the reason why she didn't get that much time is because she's a white woman, which that may be true. And I'm not saying that isn't, because probably if she had been a black madam, she might have gotten more time and might have been looked at in a different light. But she's still a woman at the end of the day. She's still a woman, and all of these other women are still women too. All of these women, the 12 women who throughout history, even the African American woman that passed for white, who she was an abolitionist hero, Mary Ellen Pleasant. A lot of times when they talk about these people like this, they only talk about the good things. They only talk about the good side of things. When I've heard about Mary Ellen Pleasant, I never heard about Mistress Mary Ellen Pleasant. I always heard about her being an abolitionist and, she was this pillar of the community. But you never often hear about a lot of things until you actually do the research and start digging on your own about the lives of these individuals. Because each individual has their own stories that is individual and unique to them. And so with that being said, I thought I would leave this video with this right here. And so if you want to look it up in your leisure and history, The 12 Notorious Prostitutes and Madams of the Wild West. And if you want to look up Heidi Fleiss, for those of you that are too young and can't remember or you just never heard of this woman, well, this is in People Crime. Her name is Heidi Fleiss. And put it this way, she was talked about back in the days. She was talked about a lot, a lot in the media. She was almost every time you flipped on the TV, it was about this woman. But anyway, with that being said, like, comment, subscribe, and thanks for listening.